Hey, so I want to dig into the map that the Nile is showing us regarding the house of Osiris, the place of Osiris. Um, there are, I'm sure you probably have seen this diagram before, but this is the trapezium of the Orion Nebula, and this is the Nile Delta, that is. And as you can see, what I've done right here for everybody is I have taken three fractals that appear around the outside of the Nile, and you can run your eye all the way down and you can see that these same things appear each time, A, B, and C. You can see that these fractals appear the same all the way through. This one appears as just like a little peg or a little tack stuck in a board. It goes all the way through. This one is kind of like an upside down U or an upside down W in a way, and you can see that this is manifested all the way through. And you can see that it's a little bit fuzzy and so forth, but you can see that the shapes, the general shapes, are the same, as well as this one right here, this triangular shape with this specific thing on the end of it. The reason why all this is so important is because this helps us when we look at things like the Orion Nebula. This helps us know which way that the brain is supposed to be facing. Also, anthropomorphic wise, we can see that if this is the spinal cord and this area right here is the brain, we can actually see the outline of a man's head right here and his body going down here. But this right here shows us the correct way to face the brain. But more so, I mean, we simply have the curvature of the spine that shows that to us as well. This is pulled from the Temple in Man in Luxor. And it just so happens that when you put these Flower of Life all across Egypt right here, starting with the Flower of Life right here, right where the Great Pyramids are, and doing a radius circle right around the edge of the Nile Delta up here, and you continue your Flower of Life all the way down, that interestingly, right here, exactly on the money, you get Abydos, you get Luxor, this area right here, and when you stretch this thing out, you get these, each Vesica Pisces, you get the entrance and exit to these various areas. So this right here, we're gonna dig a little bit deeper into the map that we have here on the Nile, but I want to show you an interesting phenomenon so that you'll understand it when you see it again. So looking at this diagram again, we can see that this is the spinal cord, and it comes up and the brain fits right in here as well. However, we can also take a look at this, because when we overlay the whole Orion Nebula on top of the planet, where the trapezium right here is also the trapezium right here, we can see the darker mountains right here. That manifests as this area right here. So we have this layered Vesica Pisces, a macro version or a larger version, and a smaller version. The larger version of the whole Vesica Pisces inside the center of the brain covers Jordan, Israel right here, Sinai Peninsula, and then of course Egypt. Right here I've got everything circled in dotted lines so that you can see all the various fractals that we've seen before and how they match up, as well as the larger picture, the larger Vesica Pisces, and that is what we have right here, where we have Jordan representing this area that's right here. Now here's what's interesting about this phenomena. So if we take the whole Orion Nebula like we just saw, where Jordan is one end of that Vesica Pisces. The smaller version, where you see the brain inside the Nile Delta coming up, where the pineal gland is located, which is right here inside the smaller brain, is also where the pineal gland is located in the larger version. So it's almost like you have this target zooming in on a particular location. And that's a phenomenon that we may see switch back and forth as we try to explain some of the interesting things that are happening here. Some we will get into that are very abstract, as we start zooming out and taking a look at the whole world, we'll see that we'll see something that gives us an indication, another indication of our reality, and that it may not be physical just by what we're seeing. But I wanted to show you this right here because in both cases, in the larger case and in the smaller case, both have the pineal gland focused right in the same area, right where it should be. So knowing that we have the Nile lined up properly, with everything around the outside of the Nile Delta properly, and then we take a look at the Orion Nebula, we can see that the brain is facing the proper direction where the frontal lobe is on the right. This is what nature tells us. And so then when we flip back over to the Nile area, we can feel confident in knowing that the brain is facing the right area, the right direction, as well as the spinal cord, the curvature of the spinal cord showing the same thing. So now let's take a look. What I've done basically is I've tried to make the map as accurate as possible based on what I'm seeing. And it's relatively very close. I'm sure I'm off by just a little bit, but we're going to see just how close I am, actually. The first thing is Busiris. Busiris is the place where the Ba of Osiris embraced the Ba of Re. And the Ba is basically the soul. This is where the soul is seated. This is what nature is telling us, and this is what the ancient Egyptians are telling us. They're telling us that it's seated right around in the pineal gland area. And of course we see in the very first part of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or the Egyptian Book of Coming Forth by Day, which is what it's really called, we see Osiris being described as his forms are holy, thou being of a hidden form in the temples of your head, basically. And of course, once again, we see that Osiris has come as Orion, because there's a macrocosm version of this, and that is the Orion Nebula. This is what they're pointing us to. So we can take a look now at what the pyramids, one of the things the pyramids were doing, is they were pointing us to a map on the Nile Delta, which we're going to dig into a little bit more and see if we can't figure out exactly what it's showing us. First of all, it's helpful to see a little bit of anatomy first. This word that you see right here, sideways, it says pyramid. This says olive, and I'm sure you've seen olive in the Bible before. But this word is pyramid. Notice where it's located. This is the medulla oblongata. And this is the brainstem, and this is the pons area up here. The pyramids, and there's a function called the decussation of the pyramids, is where things start crossing back and forth. Well, interestingly, the Great Pyramids, and where they're located, this dot right here, they're located right before you get to the pons. They are located where the brainstem actually goes into the base of the skull right here. You see how this area that's dark that surrounds the cerebellum and the pons is also shaped like the mouth of the Nile? This is what one of the things the Egyptians were showing us. And right here is where the pyramids of the brain are located, exactly in the same area. So this is one check we can do right here. This happens to be the center point, which we start our flower of life. We draw these circles around, and it helps us pinpoint what we're going to do next. So this marker that you see right here, this is Busiris. This is apparently where Busiris is located. This is what they give us as far as the coordinates. Now, the coordinates that they're giving us may be slightly off. They may be pretty close, but here's something to pay attention to, because remember, we're looking at the brain here. You see this water canal? Well, this is where Busiris is located. So this apparently is where the pineal gland is located, in this area right here. Okay, and we're going to see just how close that is, because we're going to see what we do with the pyramid itself, the so-called king's chamber and the so-called queen's chamber. And we're going to see how this lines up, because anything inside the pyramid will be the brain, and anything outside of the pyramid would be the brainstem and the spinal column. So let's take a look at what we got, because they said that the pyramid is the construction of Osiris. And when we take a look at this, and we take a look at the lower chamber here, take a look at the queen's chamber, we take a look at the king's chamber here, this area that you see with the dot on it, that's where I showed you where Osiris is located. It's a difference between there and what I've got right here. It's a slight difference, but it's basically almost right on the money. As you can see right here, it could very well be somewhere close to there. I mean, this is, we don't know why. Perhaps maybe the land is shifted a little bit or something, but bottom line is it looks like it's correct. Also notice the canals that you see of the water and how it goes through the queen's chamber and follows its way up and goes to Osiris. I think that's important. That lets us know something either about blood flow or CSF, cerebral spinal fluid. I don't know yet, but let's take a look at this now. We have 3 points. Notice that this lower chamber is fixated right where the spinal column is. Notice that where the queen's chamber is, and notice that the king's chamber is located right where Osiris is. Well, let's take a look at what the brain looks like. When we put the brain stem inside there, right through this lower chamber, you'll notice that what happens is the brain stem comes up, and then it slightly moves off to an angle, to a right angle. This is exactly what we see happening with the queen's chamber and the king's chamber. So everything seems to be falling right in line. Where it comes up, this area right here in the center of the base of the pyramid is where the Great Pyramids are, and then it begins to veer off to the right. And we have the queen's chamber here, and this area right here, this little open area that you see in here, is where the fourth ventricle is, and I believe that that is what the queen's chamber is referring to. It's referring to the fourth ventricle. And this area right here is where the king's chamber is, and this would be right where the pineal gland is located, right here. There's a difference between this and this, Osiris and this king's chamber here. There's no reason, I mean, there's no telling why it's off by that much, but that's very marginal, and it seems to represent the same thing. Now let's take a look at the king's chamber itself, because it has some features on it that I believe are very indicative about what's going on here. These are jed pillars, right? We already know that Osiris is located where the pineal gland is located. And here is some Egyptian art inside a tomb. We can see that jed pillar. You see how they do this with the, it's like the spinal columns coming up. And you see how we have this pillar coming up, and then we have these 3, it's usually 3 or 4, and then we have this little sun right here. It represents the third eye right in between the 2 eyes. And this is Osiris, his back. Same thing, with his head representing the pineal gland again. Now, here's where the king's chamber seems to fall in line, because it looks just like a jed column. And we see 1, 2, 3, 4, which is typically the number that you will see on the jed column. And then I believe the 5th one right here represents the pineal gland. When we take a look here at the brainstem, the thing I want you to look at here is notice that this triangular region that you see right here is also what you see when you take a look at the pineal gland area. So I believe that this area represents the pineal gland. So this is what I believe this whole thing is right here. It's a jed pillar, where the top of it represents the pineal gland. Once again, here's Osiris with the his body as the brainstem, his face is the pineal gland. And then lastly, we have Osiris, which his hieroglyph is an eye and a throne. Osiris is located basically right where the pineal gland is located, minus a small marginal difference. But it seems to be right on. And I think what makes this thing work really well and show that we're looking at the right thing here is that we see this spinal column or a spinal cord come down here, and it's in the lower chamber, and then when it gets up here, it veers off to the right, just like what we're seeing happen up here. So this is map number 2, and the next thing I think we're going to start doing is digging into these water canals and see if we can't figure out exactly what those are. So stay tuned for more.